Here with Asia Tonight, welcome back. Self-help groups still have a place in society. While they may be based on race, they're not bound by it. Singapore's Culture, Community and Youth Minister Edwin Tong said this in Parliament in response to opposition MP Sylvia Lim's call to pool together self-help groups like SINDA, Mendaki and CDAC to help the less privileged on a race-blind basis. Melissa Goh has more.
In his speech at the debate on the motion of thanks to the President, Culture, Community and Youth Minister Edwin Tong says being one united people regardless of race, language or religion doesn't mean letting go of cultural affinities or discouraging people of the same community from coming together to support each other. This in response to opposition MP Sylvia Lim's call to pull self-help groups together. Ms. Lim said despite the good work these groups have done, the fact is they reinforce racial consciousness.
The ethnic self-help groups, or SHGs, have rallied their respective communities to serve the more vulnerable across the spectrum of race and ethnicity. Our ideal is that one day we want to see a Singapore where we do not need such SHGs. But that is not going to come about by wishing the differences away. It can only come about by working at it actively, daily, consciously. And on critical issues such as education, economic upliftment, beyond the main efforts of government, the communities and the SHGs are mobilized, ground up, and this must be welcomed.
Ms. Lim said she wants to help move Singapore towards being a race-blind society. And Mr. Tong said he shares the same aspiration, recognizing the individuality of races but also tapping on the strength of diversity. He said racial cohesion in Singapore is anything but a natural progression, pointing out policies such as the ethnic integration policy. It seeks to promote racial integration by having quotas for different ethnic groups living in public housing flats. Ms. Lim pointed out that such policies might cause some to suffer hardship.
We all know the avowed purposes of it, but I think he will also agree and probably has come across cases where there's economic hardship caused to minority families due to the nature of the limitations placed on them when they try to sell their flats. And my concern is that if the unfairness is not addressed, the resentment might fester and in fact it might become quite a dangerous problem.
Some of these difficulties can form the conversations that we discuss and look at the trade-offs, look at the balances that we have to put in place and weave that into a discussion as to whether something ought to be changed. The intrusive social policy is always looked at as a balancing mechanism and ensuring that we do not tilt in favor of one side more so than another.
Still, he said the conversations must take place under the overriding concern that every race must be encouraged to share the Singapore identity. Youths, he said, must have an equal voice in issues of race and inclusivity, not only amongst themselves but across generations.
We need to talk about how we can refresh and revitalize the bonds that bind us, because the social solidarity that we enjoy today, that we sometimes take for granted today, has proven so important, especially in today's pandemic and the crisis. It needs constant attention. When society is torn apart by xenophobia and prejudices that appeal not to our better self but to our worst instincts, it becomes impossible to even talk about a caring society.
Mr. Tong said sports, arts, culture and a shared heritage are ways to connect and help people understand their place in society, outlining the ministry's plans in these areas. He also addressed bread and butter concerns of young Singaporeans, sharing that more opportunities will be available for youths to pick up digital and cross-cultural skills. Attention will also be paid to long-term issues like mental health and climate change. The key, he said, is to harness the energy of youth to bring about positive change in the future.